History remembers what happened, but it is shaped by moments when everything could have turned another way. A decision, a journey, a single moment. This is where we explore them. When history turned. On my walk this morning, I paid with a coin that had a head in profile, an emperor, not a president. Is there a reality where those faces never stopped appearing on our money?
There is. Listen to Lucia for a moment. She steps off a tram in a city where the denarius is everyday change. She places a coin on a cafe counter, and the vendor stamps the receipt with an imperial eagle. Notices in the tram are read in both the local vernacular and classical Latin. The words are not antique flourishes, but operative instructions. In her neighborhood, the municipal council is called a curia, and roadwork is managed by a civil engineering corps, descended from the old legions. A public notice lists maintenance schedules for aqueducts, alongside daily bus timetables. Students graduate wearing a modernized toga as a civic insignia. It is ordinary, not ceremonial. Property deeds invoke lex terms that are still part of municipal law. Market disputes are settled with references to a digest of statutes that every clerk keeps at hand. Religious buildings exist, but many double as civic temples where oaths are recorded and archives are kept. The civic vocabulary shapes everyday choices, street names, public holidays, the very way activism addresses the state. A local library hosts exhibitions on the early reforms that standardized weights and measures across provinces. A municipal brochure explains that infrastructure planning follows an unbroken administrative compact dating back to ancient law. The presence of an imperial imagery is banal. People argue about maintenance budgets, not symbolism.
How do people speak about religion in that world? Is Christianity an afterthought, or is it woven into the imperial fabric?
Religion exists, but its public role is mediated by civic institutions. Some faiths maintain autonomous communities. Others have rituals that operate under state sanction. The key is administrative integration rather than doctrinal dominance. Religious practice is accommodated within the archive and registry system, rather than forming a parallel power structure.
And what about military presence in daily life? I noticed the mention of legions as an engineering corps.
Armies exist, but their institutional role is defined as state service with engineering and administrative functions. Recruitment and logistics are regulated by law. Soldiers serve in public works, rotations, as well as defense. The military is less a personal power base and more an integrated arm of governance.
Is language uniform across provinces? You said Latin is used administratively.
Local tongues persist in everyday speech, but classical Latin remains the administrative lingua franca. Legal forms, census records, and technical manuals use Latin. That continuity keeps the law and bureaucracy interoperable across regions in a way our world did not sustain.
Do we know when this line split from ours? I want a rough anchor, a moment that began this uninterrupted administrative continuity.
Pinpointing it requires a single, decisive change in political survival and institutional design, but I will not name it until you ask me to. The hints you have: persistent imperial imagery, administrative Latin, integrated military engineering point toward a continuity of centralized authority and deliberate succession planning. All right, tell me, what precisely changed at that moment? I will need concrete elements to map the centuries that follow.
It happened in the year 44, before the Common Era, on the day known in our history as the Ides of March. In the alternate line, the assassination attempt on Julius Caesar fails. He survives the conspiracy. He responds with measured legal and administrative actions rather than unchecked vengeance. He consolidates his authority through formal reforms, a permanent executive role with institutionalized succession, a reorganization of provincial governance that incorporates elites from the provinces into central administration, and codification of statutes that bind provincial and metropolitan law.
That single survival produces two concrete structural outcomes: a stable, transmissible executive, and an integrated bureaucracy that prevents the fragmentation that led our Western provinces into feudalism. Over time, those mechanisms institutionalize symbols, such as the imperial portrait on coinage and the use of Latin in official records. From there, the centuries unfold differently. But we can summarize the main turns. In the first 3 centuries after that survival, imperial institutions consolidate. Provincial elites are absorbed into a legal framework. Standing military forces are professionalized with dual roles for defense and public works, and a body of codified law emerges that is taught across provinces. Between the 4th and the 10th centuries of that timeline, religious movements become integrated into state structures rather than forming alternative authorities. Monastic withdrawal is less economically decisive because civic archives and municipal law provide continuity of governance. In the early 2nd millennium, instead of a mosaic of feudal kingdoms, there are imperial provinces with autonomous municipal rights under an imperial court. Cities retain legal charters. Merchant networks expand under a common legal code. Scientific and technical knowledge travels along preserved roads and archival networks, so institutional learning accumulates steadily. The age of overseas expansion sees an imperial polity projecting administrative capacity into distant territories. Colonies are governed as provinces, with Roman legal structures adapted to local conditions. Latin spreads as an administrative language, producing a different linguistic map globally. Industrialization occurs under imperial patronage and municipal competition. Engineering traditions rooted in legionary praxis accelerate large infrastructure projects. Political forms adapt. Parliaments and councils emerge in many provinces, but the emperor remains a ceremonial and practical head of state whose portrait appears on currency as a marker of continuity and legitimacy. By the 20th century of that line, institutional adaptability keeps the empire in place. As a federated imperial system, coins still show emperors because the office has been legitimized through law, public service, and a narrative of continuous stewardship rather than personal autocracy.
Contrasting that with our history, the assassination succeeded, the Republic gave way to an empire that later fractured, Western provinces experienced collapse and feudal fragmentation, and religious institutions often became independent political powers. These ruptures replaced a single imperial continuity with many competing polities and, eventually, modern nation-states led by presidents and monarchs without the same imperial portrait tradition.
If your original question is whether there is a reality where emperors still appear on everyday coins, the answer is yes. And the root cause is simple and specific. Julius Caesar survives the Ides of March, institutionalizes succession, and builds a durable administrative framework. That single political survival channels centuries of continuity into tangible daily life symbols like coin portraits.
It is striking how a single event can change what we consider ordinary. In one line, an emperor's face on a coin is an administrative token. In another, the same image would be an anachronism. That teaches us something about contingency. Symbols persist or vanish depending on whether institutions survive long enough to make them mundane.
If this wasn't the only timeline you'd like to visit, subscribe.